Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This time we're going to be going through the upcoming DLC, The Grim and the Grave for Total War Warhammer. We're going to go through the Steam page and talk about everything they're releasing and all the interesting tidbits and all the potentially uninteresting tidbits. And I'm going to give my general thoughts on it from lore perspective, gameplay perspective, and of course financial perspective. So first thing we're going to do, like we did last time, is we're going to run through the video for it and the screenshots, talk about everything we see, and we're just going to go down the whole page. So we'll go ahead and start with the video, and then we'll go from there. So enjoy.
Sega.
'Twas a twin-tailed comet that heralded Sigmar's coming. But not every celestial body is heavenly. When darkness falls, there are those that turn to the light, and those that would embrace the shadows. The faithful and the dead have been at war for centuries. Now, at its zenith, a victor must emerge. Soldiers of light and fearsome abominations. A host of new combatants answer the call. Only one can win in this ageless war.
Alright, so that was the trailer, which was fantastic. I honestly think that that's probably the best trailer they've put out so far. It gives you a little bit of story, but more importantly, it introduces all the new stuff in a really nice, short, very clever way. So, looking at this, we're not going to spend too much time on the screenshots because they give you all of the information down here. But we'll look at some of these. So first of all, we have this son of a bitch, which is the Mortis engine, which is probably the unit I am the most excited for. We'll talk about the units more when we get down to that part of the page, but the new units look fantastic. I'm glad that they're faithfully recreated to their tabletop iterations. The Mortis engine is a very busy unit. It's literally got like a whole host of ethereal units dragging it along. And it's got notable amount of banshees swirling around it that do their little banshee scream business, and here they represented it awesomely. It looks great. And then you've got the Arc Lector, who I'm super excited for, finally getting another general choice for the Empire, which is going to make them way less boring. Plus, I'm glad that we're finally getting another Lord who isn't wielding sword and shield. I'm glad that they're... One of the things I don't like about most of the Lords currently in the game is that they're sword and board, which I know, like, the game's like, oh, they do that because missile resistance, but I feel like characters should just have missile resistance just because they're characters. So I'm glad to see we're getting someone who's not just wielding hand weapon and shield. I sincerely hope there's more than just the dual hand weapon variant. I hope there's a great weapon variant as well. Because if there's one thing the game desperately needs, it's variants among characters. Like, I want to see White Kings wielding shields and axes, or swords, and White Kings wielding great axes, and White Kings... Yeah, I want to see variants. But let's go ahead and move on. Then we've got, of course, our Knights of the Blazing Sun, which look fantastic, and I know a lot of people, myself included, are really excited for one of the Elite Knight units joining the game. I'm happy to see that instead of making them a Regiment of Renown, they decided to just make them a brand new unit type. That's really exciting. I like that a lot, and they've got flaming attacks, so hey, that's cool. Not at all what they did in Tabletop, but cool enough. Then here we've got another unit I am crazy psyched for, which is the Strigoi Ghoul King. Definitely my favorite type of lord from the Vampire Count's army. So I'm excited to see that the Vampire Count's roster is finished. I think they're missing their swarm units, the Bat Swarm and the Spirit Host, which I don't know if swarms are ever going to join the game, but if they do, they're missing those for the Vampire Counts, and then they're missing 2 mounts, being the Abyssal Terror and the Coven Throne. But other than that, they have the entire roster, which is awesome. The Strigoi Ghoul King's a definite plus. He looks huge, and having a Terrorgeist mount, mwah, awesome. Flagellants, of course, are in the game. The Flagellants look hilariously derpy and creepy. I love that they did a good job making them look as crazy as they need to. Gonna be nice to have some unbreakable units in the Empire. Of course, just some fight scenes after that. The War Altar, we'll get more into that later. And Volkmar on the campaign map, which he is gigantic. Though his horses look like they have little stubby legs on this picture. And here you get a look at some of the Regiments of Renown, which are these units with the purple icons. Which is really nice. I'm looking super forward to the Regiments of Renown. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the content. I'm not going to read it word for word. I will touch on important parts. If you want to read it word for word, you're a big boy / girl and you can go do it yourself. But, so this focuses, as I predicted when they announced Volkmar, on the Sigmar's Blood campaign, which technically was between Volkmar the Grim and Manfred von Karstein, but because Manfred's already in the game, they decided to create Helman Gorst, who was the hero level necromancer you got for the campaign. If you've never heard of Sigmar's Blood, if you look on my channel, there's a playthrough with me playing as Volkmar, or as the Empire, and Izzy playing as the Vampire Counts, that you can go watch. And I'm going to be doing another playthrough of the campaign on stream, probably the day before this DLC drops. So let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, you get Volkmar the Grim, the Grand Theogenist and the head of the Cult of Sigmar. Here he gives a little bit of lore about him. When you take him on the campaign, any flagellants you recruit will gain improvements to their weapon damage and charge bonus stats, and are cheaper to recruit. That's fantastic. Definitely does a good job of pushing you to recruit a certain kind of unit, especially since there's another thing he can get. I think it's one of his items gives, I think it's either an item or a command ability he gives flagellants very high missile resistance, which is going to make them disgusting with Volkmar. I mean, unbreakable units that with all these stat bonuses are going to be really nice. Then you've got his legendary items, the Jade Griffin, which is this giant, massive glowing thing that's on his chest, which gives him regeneration. The Staff of Command, which improves his combat skills, public order management, post-battle loot income. This guy definitely seems he's going to be very much up the alley of if you want to have a really tight-knit control over your empire. You're definitely going to want to go with Volkmar with that high public order. Really like that. Obviously, he's got his battle prayers, and once he's unlocked all of them, he gains access to the War Altar of Sigmar. I'm hoping that means there's not a level specific cap, like you can just get the War Altar of Sigmar like level 4 or 5, whatever it is. Once you have all the battle prayers, that would be super awesome if you could get it that early. Which I am so excited for the War Altar. It's a little bit of a shame you could only take it on Volkmar instead of the Arc Lectors as well, but I guess it makes Volkmar nice and unique, so that's fine. And then unique skills, Parabellum Aternus and Heretic Hunter, which makes Flagellants and Warrior Priest better, which makes sense, and that's great. And then you got Helman Gorst, who has very little amount of lore. I'll be talking about him pretty soon. But when he joins the campaign, he gives increased casualty replenishment to your entire campaign, which is disgusting. Granted, that's not a huge buff to the Vampire Counts, because with Raised Dead troop replenishment isn't that huge of a deal, but it's still a nice buff. But more importantly, he gives his entire army poison attacks, which is disgusting. That is so disgusting. For him, that probably means you're not going to want to run ghoul units because you won't be really gaining from it as much, because their big thing is that they bring poison attacks to the table. With him, you're probably going to rely a lot more on elite units. Excuse me, goodness. Like Vargeist, Vargulfs, Graveguard, especially. But, I mean, that means everything in his army is going to be debuffing the enemy as they fight, which is going to make him just super good. Like, Direwolves in his army, too, are going to be disgusting. Then he's got the Liber Noctis, which which when activated reduces the cooldown on his special abilities and weakens nearby enemies in battle. It doesn't specify how it weakens them, but I'm sure we'll find out about that soon. They haven't released his skill page yet. And then he rides a corpse cart, which I really hope all necromancers can ride corpse carts. I hope that's not just Gorst. If so, that's gonna suck, because that's supposed to be a pretty common mount. That being said, his is supposed to be the strongest version, which his version improves his weapon strength and damage output, which I like a lot, because that's going to really encourage you to have a necromancer leading from the front, which right now you don't really have. Probably the most powerful combat necromancer at the moment is Kimmler, which we'll talk about Kimmler a bit and what this DLC means for him. But Kimmler is much more of like the elite support necromancer, whereas this guy seems to be the elite combat necromancer. And then he has Awaken from the Grave, which is a unique spell for him, which I'm guessing is replacing his Raised Dead, which summons a unit of Graveguard, or if you cast the big version, a White King. I hate that Gorst has this and not Kimmler, because this makes literally no sense. Like, it's a cool ability and it sets him apart, but the fact that he has it and not Kimmler kind of rubs me the wrong way, seeing as Kimmler's whole thing is whites. And like in tabletop, whenever like you're supposed to put Kimmler in a white unit, because whenever he shanks somebody with a sword, he brings a white back to life, which makes him synergize really well with whites. In tabletop, Gorst is pretty terrible, actually. Like, he writes a corpse cart, and the only two spells he's allowed to have, he doesn't even get that much of a variance, the only two spells he ever is allowed to have for the campaign are Gaze him to Gash and Van Hell's Dance Macabre. So I kind of wish they had given him like a better version of... I wish instead of this, they'd given this to Kimmler, and they gave Hellman like an improved version of Gaze him to Gash. Like, he fires twice as many missiles, or maybe like he has a lower cooldown or something. I think giving him his own Graveguard spell, like, it's cool, I just don't understand why it's on him. I like it, don't get me wrong, I like it. I just wish it was on Kimmler instead, but that's a very minor complaint. And then, of course, he has Leading from the Front, which improves the ability of corpse carts and mortis engines. So this guy kind of seems like he's really up the alley of... He's going to be really encouraging you to bring support units. Like corpse carts, which are a area of effect regeneration unit, and mortis engines, which are area of effect regeneration and area of effect damage. So it seems like, I imagine Gorst is going to be really especially with his poison attacks buff, Gorst is going to be very much up the alley of bringing a really tanky army, in my opinion. Like, with Gorst, you're going to want to bring, like, I would probably bring zombies, like, a good amount of them with Gorst, just because with those poison attacks, I know they can just hold somebody, and with the mortis engine and the corpse card, I'm just going to try and outlast them. Like, just be bearing down on them hardcore. I think with the new units we're getting, vampire counts are definitely going to kind of become the kings of long engagements, and I think the Empire is going to rise even higher on the aggressive plays. Tell you what, though, greenskins and dwarves are going to be at a bit of a disadvantage until they get their DLC. Beastmen, I think, will be fine. But anyway, so going into the first of the new units, we get the Arc Lector of Sigmar, which there are two of, but I imagine you can have as many as you want. The Arc Lectors are, of course, your Lord-level warrior priests. They, of course, have your battle prayers, so instead of just having just a basic general for every single army, you can now have probably a less combat-heavy character, but who is better at prayers. Or like he's better at supporting your army, which I really like that a lot. Of course, they go ahead and tell you what their abilities are, which are the Hammer of Sigmar to improve the Arc Lector's melee attack, Shield of Faith for increasing damage resistance for all nearby allies, which will probably be the most popular one, and then Soulfire, which does a bunch of magic, which does a ton of mass magical damage, which is going to be awesome. Because if there's one thing the Empire, I think, could be better at, it's running armies without wizards and still being competitive. Which I think the Arc Lectors are going to go a long way to help that. Then we've got what I'm probably the most excited for. I don't know, the Mortis Engine's... It's somewhere between the Mortis Engine and the Strigoi Ghoul King for me. But we've got our Ghoul Kings, which of course start on foot, and then you can upgrade them up to a Terrorgeist, which is super exciting. They made them really good spellcasters, which is kind of funny because in tabletop they're really bad spellcasters. Like they're level 1. Period. Like they're super powerful and they're really combat heavy, but they're terrible magic casters. These versions are not quite the same, but to make them different than just the regular vampire lore, they gave them a mix of the lore of vampires and the lore of death, which I think is really cool. That gives them a really neat aesthetic. That way you don't just feel like you're just taking a differently colored, because like in tabletop, the difference between them is that the vampire lord is more customizable, but tends to be a better spellcaster, whereas the Ghoul King is a little bit more of a niche thing, but he tends to be much more of just pure carnal damage. But he's not as tough, and he's not as... or he can't wear armor. So it's harder to keep him alive, but he does have a high regen save, so it kind of balances out weird. But in any event... very excited for the Ghoul Kings. I think they're going to be super awesome. And of course, they also have a unique spell, which is Command of the Unliving, which allows them to summon Crypt Ghouls or Crypt Horrors. I am 1000% okay with that. I think this is badass, and I wish this had been a rule of tabletop. Funny enough, these two new spells that they're getting are basically in-time spells from the lore of Undeath, which this whole DLC is basically in times because... Sigmar's Blood is a prequel to the End Times and is technically part of the End Times series because it sets up the revival of Nagash. But let's move on. New units. We got our Corpse Carts. Corpse Carts, very exciting little chariot units that are probably going to be pretty slow, I'm guessing. But they're magical support. They have the Rigor Mortis, which raises the melee attack of nearby undead units and regeneration on the Corpse Cart. They're going to be regenerating, which is going to be really nice because the worst thing about most support units in the game right now is that a lot of them can get burst down really fast. The Luminarch of Hysh comes to mind of that. Like, it's a really powerful buff wagon, and it does and it does really good damage with its laser beam. But most of the time when you have one, it gets focused down and just dies. The Corpse Cart's going to be a little tankier than that, and I think it's going to be crucial to have it like right smack in the middle of your army. And then it comes with 2 possible upgrades, which I guess means there are 3 versions of it. Unless those are like... I'm guessing that means there are 3 versions and not that there are like research upgrades that like upgrade all of your corpse carts. I imagine it's going to be kind of like the Gores, where you get either the regular corpse cart, the Balefire corpse cart, or the Unholy Lodestone corpse cart. The Balefire one gives an increased chance to miscast on nearby enemy wizards. That's going to be fantastic against enemy vampire count armies. And that's probably it. I think the armies that are probably using wizards the most right now are vampire counts and the Empire. I think they're pretty popular in Beastman armies. But that's going to be a really cool thing for single-player campaign. I don't see it being quite as effective in multiplayer unless you're going up against a vampire count player, in which case I think it'll be super effective because vampire count players just do nothing but spam magic because they don't know any better. And then, of course, the Unholy Lodestone upgrade, which I think will be the much more popular one, which gives an area of effect regen to all nearby friendly undead units. Which means that with that one, you get regen and melee attack on all nearby units, which is going to make it super popular. That's going to be awesome for just slapping it right in the middle of, your units of Grave Guards, or zombies or whatever you want to put it, and just letting it just keep them up forever while you use like your Black Knights or your Hex Race or your Varguys to do harassment and keep people off your flanks. The Mortis Engine, one of a fantastic unit that was introduced in 8th edition, super fun. I'm glad they were able to bring it into the game. It comes with, I think it automatically comes with the Blasphemous Tome. I'm thinking that there's not 2 versions, I think it's just 1. So it's a magical support chariot as well. It regens itself in nearby friendly units, so regeneration is definitely the hallmark of the undead armies right now, and it does magical damage to nearby enemy units within the same radius. So basically this thing is like a support bomb that you put right smack in the middle of wherever you need to punch through, because this thing is going to guarantee that you're going to win those Dragon fights. Like, it seems like the undead are going to be, which is good because the vampire counts are supposed to be the best in the game at just slugging it out. The only army that's supposed to even be remotely close to taking them on at it is like the Tomb Kings, because they can play the same game. Except for the Tomb Kings are more about like maneuvers and outflanking and shooting, whereas the vampire counts are just purely about getting into combat and just grinding you down until there's nothing left. I guess the Skaven would probably actually be the best example of the other grind army. But in any event, it also comes with the Blasphemous Tome, which increases the owner's Winds of Power reserve, which is super awesome for the vampire counts. Vampire count players are always needing more Winds of Magic. Like, that's their thing. So I honestly think the Mortis Engine is going to be a must-have in almost every vampire count army. I think it's going to be something that's like crazy popular. Of course, its only downside is when it explodes, it causes a ton of damage to nearby friends and foes, which is just like it is in tabletop. I think it depends a lot on how big the explosion radius is compared to like its regen radius, because if it can get blasted down pretty fast by like cannons or something, if that thing goes off prematurely, it'll probably cost you a match. If it does as much damage as it probably should for how good it is. But on the other hand, if your opponent is doing damage to it and you realize it's about to blow up, you can really take advantage of it by just throwing it into the enemy's most expensive unit line and just letting it blow up and doing a ton of damage. So it does a nice job as kind of a little like kamikaze strategy, which I think will be really popular. Then we've got the Free Company Militia, which I was surprised to see because they're actually in a variant that they don't exist in tabletop, which is that they're dual role, in that they have short-range pistols and swords. In tabletop, they're purely dual swords, like they're double hand weapon units. So I'm really glad to see that they changed them a little bit to make them more viable. So they have the Vanguard ability, which is really awesome, and they're dual role. So this is the first time we have a unit that's really good, or that's pretty damn good at shooting and fighting on the run. We have some units that are good at shooting and fighting in place, like most of the dwarf range units, like Great Weapon. Great Weapon Quarrelers are pretty good, fighting melee and shooting. And obviously Orc Error Boys are also much in that category. But with these guys, the Empire is going to have a really effective Vanguard deployment unit that's going to be pretty good at harass. I think they're going to be really good for taking out enemy chaff, like Warhounds and probably anything that's not a Cav unit. I imagine Cav are still going to whip up on them pretty good. But I'm hoping they'll be able to beat Chaos Marauders. If they can beat Norskin Marauder units, then that would be pretty awesome. These guys would be really high demand in my opinion. But they'll be really fantastic though for wiping out enemy chaff and taking out war machines probably. Flagellants. These guys I think are going to be a big game changer for the Empire, giving the Empire access to an unbreakable, like the Empire's equivalent to Slayers. Your wonderful frenzied and unbreakable unit, which is fantastic because it means they're going to do a ton of damage. And their Strength of the Penitent, which gives them enhanced physical resistance and melee defense. I'm guessing based on the way that they say supercharges and it's a special ability means it's an activatable ability, which if you stack the fact that they get physical resistance, melee defense, on top of it, if you take Volkmar, they get missile resistance, melee attack, and I think damage. That's disgusting. Like, this unit gets better in every single category. So I think they're going to be a really awesome unit for holding the flank. If not, sending them around the side and bringing them into the enemy's rear to just tear them apart. Awesome unit. I'm really looking forward to those. And then the Knights of the Blazing Sun are the last of the new units, which are a new knight unit, which Empire players should be excited for because it brings something new and exciting to the heavy cav gameplay that the Empire are pretty famous for in tabletop. They're shot cav, which is fine. And they have magic resistance because of their shields, which is kind of weird. Like, it's like they have glinting shields, so they blind people, and I'm like, oh, so they have like melee resistance, and it's like, so they have magic resistance. I'm like, I don't understand how that works. Are you saying they like see the wizard across the battlefield and like aim your shields and like blind him specifically? But whatever. Magic resistance on knights is very welcome in my opinion, because that Fate of Biuna, man, that just absolutely destroys knight units. So if these guys have improved magic resistance so that they can ignore some of that damage and survive at like half strength or something from Fate of Biuna, that would be fantastic. And then of course they have flaming techs, which brings me to my side point about the vampire counts. So one thing the vampire count players are going to have to watch out for that they're probably not thinking about is that with all these new region powers, which are so nice and sexy, there comes a weakness. Regen comes at a price. If you have high regeneration, that means you take bonus damage from flaming attacks, which means that units like Knights of the Blazing Sun are going to be just like cataclysmically good against the undead. And things like Iron Drakes, Flame Cannons, who else has flaming attacks in this game? Ground Knights have magical attacks, not flaming attacks. There's actually not a ton of flaming attacks in the game. Well, I get Lore Fire, of course. But flaming attacks are going to be really, really good against the vampire counts. Like, the vampire counts are probably going to have a disgusting weakness to flaming due to the fact that they have so much regen just everywhere. Because some units regenerate health but don't actually give the regen rule, it seems like in the case of Kemmler, but it seems like these legitimately are giving regeneration to nearby units, which, if that's the case, I'm thinking that it's going to come with the downside as well, which is going to make units like the Knights of the Blazing Sun really good. And I'll tell you what, I think the day of the Iron Drakes may be coming for the dwarves. Alright, and then the Regiments of Renown, another thing that I am super excited for in this release. So let's go ahead and dive into it. There are 18 Regiments of Renown. All of these new units, which I was so excited to see coming, were basically added just so they could add the 18 Regiments of Renown. So with that, let's hop into it. So first you have the Tattersouls, which are a group of flagellants that have increased unit size. What's to say? That's awesome. More health, more damage, more guys. Need I say more? The flagellants are probably the most powerful unit being added, in my opinion, just due to the sheer amount of buffs that they bring to the table, and if Volkmar's with them, they're disgusting. So I think the Tattersouls are going to definitely be a very popular unit. Sterling's Revenge, free company militia that comes with stock, armor-piercing missiles, and immune to psychology, which I'm guessing means that the other guys don't have armor-piercing missiles, despite the fact they have handguns. So I'm not 100% sure. You'd figure they would because they're guns, but maybe they're just throwing this in so that you know every single rule that they have. But I'm not sure. The stock and immune to psych, though, is really good. Stock is awesome because having those guys being able to hide until they're close, considering they have short-range pistols and that they're probably going to be pretty effective in close combat compared to a lot of stock units, means they're going to be super effective for taking out chaff and war machines. I think that these guys are going to be very, very helpful. I don't think they're by any means the best of the Empire Regiments of Renown. I think they're actually one of the worst ones, but they're decent. But that being said, I think they're going to be really fun. A great way to use them would probably be to have 2 units of free company militia, one being Sterling's Revenge. Put one somewhere where the enemy can see them so that they think that's where you're deploying your scouts, and then put Sterling's Revenge like on the complete opposite side and come in and take them out while they go after your other unit. The Hammer of the Witches, which is a great cannon that has enhanced physical resistance and magical damage. The magical damage is very, very welcome because it's going to allow it to just obliterate ethereal units, which there aren't a ton of in the game, but it's always welcome. And plus, that magical damage is going to help them scythe through certain kinds of resistances, which is going to be really nice. But more importantly is the enhanced physical resistance, which means they're resistant against enemy flyers, they're resistant against enemy war machines, and all that stuff, which I think is really awesome. Like the fact that, that means that they can get in a counter barrage with like Bretonian trebuchets or dwarf war machines or whatever. The Hammer of the Witches is probably going to come on top most of the time. Also because most of these units also, I think, have generally better stats on top of these extra abilities. Sigmar's Sons, swordsmen that are unbreakable. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty fucking awesome. The only downside to swordsmen in the game right now is that they're not the highest leadership unit, but they're really good for their cost. So Sigmar's Sons being unbreakable, fantastic. I can't give any complaints there. The Silver Bullets are handgunners that have stock, and their bullets deal magical damage. This is a really interesting unit. I think, honestly, just giving them magic damage would have been enough to make them worth it, but the fact that they also have stock makes them really effective, because handgunners are disgustingly good, but one problem they often suffer from is that you have to get them into a really specific position, which is very difficult most of the time. So the fact that these guys have stock so you can deploy them anywhere on the table and they're invisible to the enemy is fantastic, because they're a unit you're going to want to hide until the big engagement starts, and then you just walk them up behind the enemy, open fire, and just rip people to pieces. So I think that unit is going to be one of the better ones. The Sunmaker has flaming attacks and increased number of missiles per volley. Which is funny because you figure the Helmstorm Rocket Battery would always have flaming attacks, but it actually has explosion damage, not flaming damage, except for this one, which does. The Hellstorm Rocket Batteries are already pretty disgustingly good. They're not the best war machine in the game, but they're really good. For the fact that they're supposed to be inaccurate, according to CA, they're very irritatingly accurate, considering for how much AoE damage they do. And on top of that, so the fact that they have an increased number of missiles per volley is just gross. I think they could have given them flaming attacks and that would have been just fine. The increased number of missiles per volley, I honestly think this is going to be a must-have unit for most armies. Next, we've got the Tempelhof Luminarch, which is a Luminarch of Hysh that has Encourage, and it gets, on top of that, I guess a bounce spell version of the Net of Amnatok, which I'm hoping that since it has the Net of Amnatok, it casts it like we would cast like the Ruby Ring of Flame, or Ruby Ring of Ruin, or the Ring of Fire. I'm hoping it's like you just get to cast it for free and it doesn't actually cost magic. If it doesn't cost magic, this is the best thing in the game. Like, hands down. Getting a free Net of Amnatok from a unit that then shoots a freaking laser beam that's going to murder whatever you just froze, mwah, perfect. Like, it's going to be such a great way to kill generals and big monsters. Just freeze them in place, fire off a shot, get a free couple thousand damage. And the Encourage is just icing on the cake, considering that Luminarchs already have an area of effect that increases the... I want to say it gives a... I don't remember if it gives a ward save or a damage resistance save, but it gives some kind of defensive bonus to all nearby units. So throwing Encourage on top of that is going to make the Tempelhof Luminarch a really awesome buff wagon. Then, of course, we have the Royal Altdorf Griffites, which their only buff is they cause terror. Causing terror is cool. I mean, they already cause fear. But terror just means that when they charge in, that they're going to have a very high chance of auto-breaking the enemy. It's pretty good. Definitely not the best. You figure they would have given them something a little bit more. But it's decent. I'll take terror causing. Obviously that sucks against like vampire counts, but against everyone else, especially the low leadership armies like Greenskins and Beastmen, it's going to be a very awesome, effective unit. It's gonna really pull its weight. And then Zintler's Reichsguard, which are a Reichsguard unit with Vanguard. That's awesome. A heavy cav unit with Vanguard. That's the only one that I know of. That is disgusting. I mean, I guess Great Weapon Centaurs could count, but they're not very armored. These guys, I mean, Reichsguard are awesome for slamming into the combat and they just stay there. And so having a Vanguard version of these guys, you're going to have such an easy time tearing up people's back flanks or forcing them on the defensive while your army gets close. So these guys are going to be freaking awesome. Alright, and that's it for the Empire, so let's move on to the Vampire counts. So first we got the Feasters in the Dusk, which are the Crypt Ghoul unit. They have Stalk and Vanguard deployment. That's very nice. I don't have much to add. Crypt Ghouls are a support unit at the end of the day. They are not a heavy damage dealer, and they are not a heavy tank unit. They are a support unit. You're supposed to get them in with those poison attacks, get them into the enemy flank, or the enemy rear, preferably, where they're hitting a maximum amount of units, and do some debuffs while your units in the front tear people apart. Giving these guys Stalk and Vanguard is going to be, at least for the way I use ghouls, this is perfect. I like my ghouls as flankers, and giving them Stalk and Vanguard means I'm going to be able to hide them really, really efficiently and just tear people apart when I get my hands on them. But you won't want to put them in Gorse Army, because that would be a waste. The Devils of Schwarzhofen are a unit of Vargeist with Vanguard deployment. That's pretty awesome. I don't think it's great. I think this is the worst of the Vampire Count units, because since they're a flying unit, having Vanguard isn't really that big of a deal. The only way I see the Vanguard being actually helpful is if you're like fighting multiple armies and you send them forward to like attack like an isolated army or something, or like if your enemy is like crazy war machine heavy, I guess you could use them to slow it down. But Vargeist are so squishy, I really don't see that being very good. The only way I could see the Devils of Schwarzhofen being like amazing is if you run an army that has a lot of Vanguard units. So like you run an army that's pretty heavy on dire wolves and stuff like that you can deploy out there, and hex wraiths. So I think if you build an army that revolves around the Devils of Schwarzhofen, they could be really good because they'll allow those units to get a really hard punch. But I don't like that you kind of have to build around them. They're definitely, I think they're the worst of the 9. Next is the Dire Pack, which are dire wolves that have bonus versus large, which is amazing because it means they can tear up cavalry and that they can tear up monsters, or at least harass monsters. And then they have increased mass and size, which increased size is just a gimmick, but I think it's really awesome. Like, I think that's really cool that they're actually going to be, like, bigger. It's going to make them stand out in a really awesome way. They're probably doing that because a lot of these units are going to be colored really differently, but for the direwolves, it's probably not as easy to color them differently, so they just decided to make them bigger so they'd stand out. And then, of course, they have increased mass, which increased mass, in my opinion, is one of the best things you can have on anything in the game. Because the bigger mass you have, the less likely you are to be knocked over by something, and the more likely you are to knock something over. So these guys are going to be super awesome at just tearing into anything, really. They're better against infantry, and they're better against large due to the fact that they have increased mass. And of course the bonus versus large. So I think the Dire Pack is going to be... I'm hoping you can get them pretty early. As an early unit, they would be amazing. Really awesome unit. The Stearnsman, Graveguard with Regeneration. There's nothing to say to that. That's awesome. Regen is always welcome, especially on the Vampire accounts, who can take better advantage of Regen than any other army in the game because they don't break. The Regen counter... The nice thing about the Regen is it doesn't stop even when the... I think it's supposed to, but it doesn't stop even when the Vampire accounts start crumbling. So the Regen is a really nice countermeasure to when your Graveguard the Stearnsmen get outnumbered and or start crumbling for some reason. So I think this is definitely an awesome unit. That being said, though, it still does come with the weakness that they're going to be more vulnerable to fire, so you're going to have to watch out for that. The Tithe, a unit of zombies that have increased size and physical resistance. You want a really big tank unit? There's your really big tank unit. You're welcome. That's a unit that's literally designed to just get in the way and just sit there forever. Already in Total War Warhammer, if you have the right build in your army, like with generals and stuff like that, you can design zombie units that will literally sit there for fucking ever, and they won't go anywhere. They'll just sit there, and they will just tank for the longest time. These guys are gonna take that to like the penultimate. This unit is definitely going to be awesome for functioning in the core of your army. I think the Tithe is going to be fantastic in like Helman Gor's army. Give these guys poison attacks, mwah, nothing to worry about. Hell, even with Kimmler, they'd be really good because Kimmler can give out that super powerful region. The Chill guys, hex rays that have magic resistance and a slowing aura, which we'll go ahead and throw the Claw of Nagash in with this as well. Magic resistance on ethereal units is disgusting. It takes their only weakness and makes it not in like reduces how bad it is. So that means hex rays are going to be much more difficult to just the chill guys, not hex rays in general, just the chill guys are going to be much more difficult to nuke down. Which is going to definitely make them much more effective, and it's also going to make them better at assassinating characters. Because magic weapons aren't guaranteed to murder them as quickly. And the slowing aura is so good. I didn't know CA even could do slowing auras, really. I guess I did know that because there are some spells that essentially do that. But units that do that, if they bring in swarms, I hope that's something swarms do, is like slow nearby units to represent like them tangling people up. But a slowing aura is disgusting. It makes flanking maneuvers more difficult. It makes retreating more difficult. And it even makes charging more difficult. And for the chill guys in particular, this is awesome because it's going to make them one of the best units at the game, considering they're ethereal, which means that they move over all terrain without any penalty. So on top of the fact that they never get slowed down, no matter how tough the terrain is, and on top of that, they slow you down, these guys are going to be a nightmare for backlines because like your ranged units aren't going to be able to run away from these guys. Like if you're not manually controlling your guys, the chill guys are probably going to be the perfect unit for hunting down enemy vanguard units like Chaos Hounds, Marauder Horsemen, and Pistoliers, because those units aren't going to be able to outrun these guys. Hex rays are already pretty fast. They ignore terrain, and with the slowing aura, I bet they're going to be able to catch those units that have skirmish mode on. Which, if that's the case, Chillgeist are going to be probably the best unit in the Vampire Count Regiments of Renown roster. Claw of Nagash, basically the same story. The slowing aura isn't quite as crazy awesome on him. For him, it's more of pinning people in place. Granted, it's going to be really good for when you want to explode him on the enemy because they're not going to be able to get away from him, and he can just run up on him and kamikaze. But with the slowing aura on him, it's also going to make the enemy's hope of like remaneuvering or getting out of the way or retreating from a unfavorable combat. If the Mortis Engine is involved, they're fucked. Like the Mortis Engine is going to just shit all over that. Varix Reavers, Black Knights with Regeneration. This is probably the second best unit, in my opinion, for the Regiments of Renown for the Vampire Counts. Like, on Graveguard, it's pretty good, but it's not as good because Graveguard can't fall back, heal, and then come back in. They're too slow. Like, Graveguard, you just have to throw them in and just sort of hope the regen just, keeps you on good terms. Black Knights, however, are heavy enough and fast enough that they can come in, plow. I hope they have lances. Plow in on the charge, do a ton of damage with that charge. But pardon my dog if you hear her coughing. She's got a hairball or something. Charge in, do a ton of damage with that lance charge, and then you just fall back. You run in, do a ton of damage. After you do your damage, you're starting to take more. You fall back as best you can. Regen, like just wait, so you don't even have to cast magic on them. You just regen for a second and then slam back in. Pull out, regen for a second, slam back in. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, the Königstein Stalkers, which are a skeleton warriors unit that have poison attacks and improved armor, which is amazing. Skeleton warriors are they're a passable unit right now. I wouldn't say they're great, but they're passable. Giving them improved armor and poison attacks is going to make them very tanky. And is going to do a very, very good job of letting them hold their ground and be one of your better... a lot of the units the Vampire Counts got are just tankier. Like regen, increased size, and physical resistance, magic resist, regen, improved armor. Like, of the 9 units they got, 6 of them are just more defensive, is really all they did. Which is just going to make the Vampire Counts more elite at slugging it out. And considering a lot of these units already have regen or are tougher, throwing in your Mortis Engine or your Corpse Guard, which is going to improve their regeneration skills, is going to make Vampire Count armies very, very tough. But that's it for this DLC. Personally, I think this DLC is disgustingly good. And it's $7. That is crazy good value, I think. I mean, compared to, especially if we're comparing it to the Beastman DLC, which was $20, $8. That's half the price for, honestly, it's not as much content, but it feels like it's as much content, just because of everything that's in it is really exciting. Like, the problem a lot of people had with the Beastman DLC was that you just kind of got a lot of the same stuff, because the Beastman had like 9 different units and that was it. You know, this DLC has 5 different units with 2 different characters, with 2 legendary lords, and with 18 special units. That feels like a ton of content. And we even get new maps. Yeah, 5 new battlefields. That is amazing. Which is just crazy awesome. Like 5 new battlefields, one of which is the Warpstone Mines with that giant Warpstone meteor, which I'm super excited for. I love Warpstone. It's such a fun little thing, and getting to actually see it on a big map and just there be tons of it is really exciting. Certainly builds up for the Skaven hype too. And that's probably going to be, I imagine that's going to be a quest battle map for Vlad von Karstein. Which brings me to Vlad. I'm going to make a separate video to talk about Vlad von Karstein. And the reason for that is because, I mean, he's free LC, so he's not really a part of this whole DLC discussion. He kind of is, but he's not. And more importantly, I know a lot of people are worried about Vlad being added to the game. Like, I think everyone's excited for Vlad. I don't think there's anybody who is like, ugh, Vlad. Like, I'm sure everyone's like, oh, that's cool. I think the problem for a lot of people is that Vlad coming back is not lore friendly. Unless you're doing end times. But it required Nagash to bring back Vlad. So that's why I want to make a separate video on it, is I kind of want to wait until they release the Vlad information. And they're like, here's Vlad's Total War Warhammer lore, and this is why he's come back to life. And I really hope CA does more than just like a single paragraph, which is like, Vlad came back, and yay. Like, I hope they actually put a little effort into it, because so far the game has been doing a really good job of staying pretty close to the lore, and only like, and the little fudges that have happened were like, they were acceptable enough. Like Grimgor and Azhag starting in the south, at first I was like, ugh. But then they were like, but they're down there because like Grimgor was insulted by like Gorfang, and he was pissed, and he went down to go kill Gorfang. And I was like, all right, that's acceptable. And then for Azhag, they were like, oh, Azhag, like Azhag's was pretty weak. Like Azhag's was just sort of that, like, there was a big wall going from the north to the south, and Azhag was like, screw it, I'll join up. Despite the fact Azhag would like almost certainly not bow down to somebody. Like, he was kind of a hitchhiker, which was just weird. Granted, it's Azhag pre-crown, so I would not say it's lore inaccurate. Like Azhag just hooking along for the ride, but then he gets the crown Nagash, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna be this crazy awesome guy. I think is actually acceptable lore. That's why I really love the Aztec campaign. But that's enough about Vlad. So overall thoughts, I think this DLC is going to be fantastic. The only reason I have not bought it yet is because I don't have $8 to my name. So if you're considering being a Patreon, I could really use the help. But in any event, I am very excited for this. I think this is going to be the best DLC we've had so far. Like, I liked the Beastman DLC, but it had a lot of controversy, just due to the price. I think, and the missing units. I think this one, considering that it's completing the Vampire Count roster, once again, minus the Swarms, which I'm not 100% sure they're going to add in the game, and 2 mounts, which are the Abyssal Terror, which only I think vampires can ride. Maybe necromancers can ride them, but I'm pretty sure only vampire counts can. And actually, no, that's probably, I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that because I can't remember. And then, of course, the Coven Throne, which only vampire lords can ride, so it's not really that big of a deal that it's not in the game yet. I really want my Coven Throne, but I can wait. And of course, the Empire roster is obviously filling out quite nicely as well. With, you know, the Empire getting 2 new units, 3 new units. I don't know why they're saying 5 new units. Knights of the Blazing Sun, Flagellants, Free Company, Mortis Engine, Corpse Guard. Oh, okay. Yep, that's right. I'm just dumb. Yeah, 2 Vampire Count units and 3 Empire units, which of course just moves the Empire a little step closer to being complete, which is going to take a long time because they have the second largest roster in the game. So, third largest, second largest, I'm not sure. Warriors of Chaos, Empire, and Orcs and Goblins have the largest rosters. Orcs and Goblins and Chaos have a long way to go. Empire, not as much. They're doing pretty good. But in any event, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really enjoy doing these kind of videos, and the last time we did it for the Beastman video, it got like a ton of attention. So hopefully this one goes over well. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them down in the comment section. I'll be keeping an eye on this one and see what questions I can answer. And as a side note, I'll be making this announcement on all the videos I'm doing this week. But as a side note, the day before this drops, so August the 31st, that evening, I'm going to do a playthrough of the, probably more like that late afternoon. I'm going to do an entire playthrough of the Sigmar's Blood tabletop campaign with Falnix. And I'm going to be playing the Vampire Counts, and he's going to be playing the Empire. So we're going to be doing it on stream. So Twitch, or www.twitch.tv/Loremaster of Sotek. August 31st, I will release an official time once I have my work schedule, because I got a new job, yay me. And once we have a time, we will get it to you guys, and we're just going to do a full playthrough of the campaign. We're going to play through all 4 scenarios back to back to back. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you have an awesome day. More stuff is coming soon. No small amount of it being Sigmar's Blood, and I'll see you guys then. So thanks for watching. Have a great night. Bye.